So I wanted to start by bringing in the fundamentals of what we're talking about today. Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime, whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States, or any place subject to their jurisdiction. This is the 13th Amendment of the United States, except as a punishment for crime. These simple 6 words hold the power to allow for legalized slavery in the United States through forced prison labor. And within those simple words contain so many stories of oppression and of exploitation. My name is Grace. I'm a member of the Fix the 13th New York campaign, and I'm really excited and grateful for your presence to welcome you all to our campaign launch today. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our allies, our friends, our community, Freedom Agenda, the Policing and Social Justice Project at Brooklyn College, Exodus Transitional Community, A Little Piece of Light, Correctional Association, the New Pride Agenda, and especially the Next 100, a project of the Century Foundation, which serves as the Fix the 13th New York home base and supports our campaign. So what are we here for? The purpose of hashtag Fix the 13th New York is to teach community members about legal slavery that is still happening in our country through the carceral system. And we're determined, we will end legal slavery in New York State. We're determined, and we just can't do it alone. We want and we need everybody's support on this because it's possible to end this senseless oppression. Our campaign mission is to work to abolish forced labor, as well as forced vocational training to improve wages and working conditions for the incarcerated people in New York State, to end exploitation and the value of all people, including individuals who are incarcerated. So essentially to return that dignity and that ability to choose, whereas the way that our system stands now insists on stripping away every element of humanity that people have as a way of retribution that creates a wave of harm that not only touches the individual, but resonates throughout our communities. It's disgraceful that humans are being paid pennies for work that brings corporation millions, if not billions. Companies like Corecraft. Corecraft is a corporation run by the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. They make $53 million each year off the lives of Black, Latinx, and all incarcerated people. So this is something going on in our own state, in such a wealthy, prosperous state that prides itself on progressiveness. So it's important for us to bring attention to this reality. Incarcerated people are responsible for making your license plates. When you make a call to the DMV, you're likely talking to an incarcerated person. They were called upon or forced to support pandemic response by bottling hand sanitizers. And there are states such as Colorado and Kansas, which already have a requirement for detainees to be paid $3 an hour. New York has to follow suit and raise prison wages. Before I introduce our first speaker, I'd like to shout out the other Fix the 13th New York campaign leaders, Aaron Friedman, Andrew, and a massive shout out to Vidal Guzman, who a lot of you are probably familiar with his work and his contributions in our community and for really critical causes and for supporting these causes fearlessly. He's a renegade and a troublemaker in the very best way. And he's the glue of this campaign for which none of this would be possible. He's the creator of the campaign and the lead organizer. And I would like to give him some time to speak about the campaign and tell you about himself and what brought us to this moment. So take it away, Vidal.
Good morning, good afternoon, and for some people, good night. Thank you for everyone who joined us from different states, from different countries, and say hello to whoever joined us from Germany. We're here today to honor Dr. Martin Luther King and our ancestors on MLK Day. MLK once said that we know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. This is a quote from a letter from the Birmingham jail on April 16, 1963. Today, the Fix the 13th NY joins other campaign in the movement to end legal slavery in America. The Fix the 13th NY campaign was founded by formerly incarcerated people and supporters, but inspired and followed the path of the Attica Uprise. When the Attica Uprise put their demands close to 51 years ago, they called for higher wages and demand that incarcerated people are able to join or create unions. In the 1970s, incarcerated people formed labor unions in 13 states and claimed over 11,000 incarcerated people collectively. We're here to make sure that we are demanding to pass policy that give incarcerated people the right to join and create unions while incarcerated. Give a voice to incarcerated people to feel valued, but create a better environment for people incarcerated. And I have to say this for correctional officers who work there. It's also time to raise wages. It's time for us to separate and pull incarcerated people from the quicksand of poverty. And the prison wages in New York State hasn't increased since 1993, when at that time Mario Cuomo was governor. People incarcerated are paid 16 cents per hour, as I was. It's time to help incarcerated people, as I said before, escape the quicksand of poverty, as they are responsible, as Grace has said, for the emergency hand sanitizer that was given around our state, our city, from making license plates that, you know, that when you drive your car, people incarcerated makes that, from making tables in our school universities where our students learn and progress in life, from benches in New York train stations for other people that don't know, our MTA, and also answering the phones for DMV for some people who don't know that the DMV or what the DMV represent is the New York State Department of Motor Vehicle. Most incarcerated people, almost all of them, are forced or coerced into forced labor or vocational training. This loophole from the 13th Amendment in 1865 didn't end slavery, but reformed slavery. As someone who is formerly incarcerated, I know how it feels to be forced into forced labor or even be forced in vocational training. I know how it feels to get paid 16 cents an hour and get a paycheck of $4 at the end of the week. And I know what it means to having to go to commissary or prison commissary and having to only buy 2 single soups, 1 stamps to send to my loved one, and a toothpaste. And those soups I had to stretch out for a whole week. Companies like Co-Crafts, a division of the Department of Correction of New York State, makes $53 million off of the labors of Black and Latinx and all other oppressed incarcerated people. It's time to end legal slavery, raise wages, and fight for people incarcerated to be able to join and create unions. That's why the Fix the 13th NY was launched today. With you, with us, we will push forward. And as I said before, the Fix the 13th of NY will be joining a movement to end legal slavery, as other states have been calling. And we're happy to join the fight to make sure directly impacted people are now seen, are now at the table, and to make sure that we protect incarcerated people at any time. Thank you.
Yes, that was everything, right? Do you feel it? Isn't that like energizing, galvanizing? I really appreciate how dynamic the chat is. So we already have a community to build on. This is just like our call to action, right? So thank you again, Vidal. The next person to speak is a powerhouse as well. Co-director of Freedom Agenda, Darren Mack.
Thank you so much, Grace. Thank you, Vidal. It's an honor to be here and join folks in this campaign to fix the 13th NY. Thank you to the audience for joining us. Just want to say, all well-meaning people believe in labor rights, the right to a minimum wage, the right to not be exploited for our labor, the right to safe working conditions, etc. But unfortunately, these rights have not been extended to the hundreds of thousands of men and women in prisons across the country. Even right here in so-called progressive New York, prison slavery is legal in practice. So as a student of history, I just would like to add to what Vidal shared by sharing some brief historical context of the struggle that is being launched today. Because there is a long trajectory of the exploitation of people's labor, and at the same time, there was resistance. You know, the exploitation of incarcerated people labor goes back to the 19th century with the convict leasing system. And people could read more about this in the historian Douglas A. Blackman book, Slavery by Another Name. However, that system of exploitation morphed into what we have today, which is prison slavery. You know, prior to the Attica Uprising in 1971, there were rebellions occurring in jails and prisons throughout New York State, protesting the inhumane conditions of confinement and exploitation. Professor Orosami Burton wrote an essay titled Organized Disorder, the New York City Jail Rebellion of 1970, I believe that's the title. And that talks more about these, you know, uprisings that happened in New York City jail system. But in July 1971, you know, prior to the Attica Uprising, 5 incarcerated men formed the Attica Liberation Faction and developed 27 demands. For example, demand number 7 is stated that they demanded that industries be allowed to enter the institutions and employ, you know, incarcerated people to work 8 hours a day and fit into the category of workers for scale wages. One of the demands was the right to join and form labor unions. Another one of the demands was the demand that all institutions using incarcerated people's labor be made to conform with the state and federal minimum wage laws. Fast forward in 2018, incarcerated people known as Jailhouse Lawyers Speaks, which is a national collective of currently incarcerated people fighting for human rights. They launched what's probably known to be the largest prison strike in the history of this country. And they, Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, they amongst themselves established 10 demands. And the second of those 10 demands, and I'll read it here, is an immediate end to prison slavery. All persons in prison in any place of detention under U.S. jurisdiction must be paid the prevailing wage in their state or territory for their forced labor. So I'll end by saying, quoting the words of the political theorist, author, and politicized prisoner George Jackson, who wrote in his book Blood in My Eye, quote, "We must prove our predictions about the future with action," unquote. So if we want to end the exploitation of incarcerated people, then get informed about this campaign, get involved with this campaign, and take action by calling your assembly member and senator to educate them about this issue and encourage them to support this campaign to end prison slavery in New York. Thank you.
All right, Darren. You know Darren's gonna come with the history, with the political education, the rebellious and the resistance education, which is so critical. That's the foundation of which we're building everything else upon. And it's just inspiration, right? Of like what people have been able to overcome and push through and fight for, so that now it's our turn to carry the baton. Like that's very real and that's our obligation. And we're not doing it alone. Just look at all the participants here, how lit the chat is. I see freedom agendas in the house like majorly, and I love to see it. But all of you have something to bring and like contribute to this campaign and inch us closer to what we're trying to do and the liberation that we're aspiring for, that we know is possible. So thank you again, Darren. Now we're going to hear from Lisa Zucker from the New York Civil Liberties Union and 13 Forward campaign.
Thank you, Grace. Vidal, Darren, thank you for inviting me today. My name is Lisa Zucker. I am a senior attorney for legislative affairs at the New York Civil Liberties Union. I am going to speak today about some legislation we are advocating for to work on and complete the work that everyone has been talking about, an end to forced and exploitive labor in New York prisons. More than 85 years ago, New Yorkers enshrined in our state constitution the following phrase: "The labor of human beings is not a commodity nor an article of commerce and shall never be so construed or considered." Great words, except when it comes to prison labor. I want to just start by saying that it's crazy. The 13th Forward campaign has been around for like 4 years, and we just hooked up like last week or the week before with your Fix the 13th campaign. So we are committed to working together, and I think it'll be an amazing partnership. So we have developed legislation to pursue this goal, to achieve this goal of ending forced and exploitive labor. I just want to give you a little background. So in the fall, we held 2 forums for formerly incarcerated men and women. Our goal there was to center their voices, of course, to educate us. We wanted to know exactly how the system works. We wanted to know what are the biggest challenges, and just as importantly, we wanted to know what folks wanted to see by way of reform. It quickly became clear to us that while folks definitely wanted to see an end to forced labor, they wanted a bigger, bolder structural change. And as I think we've heard people here already talk about, Darren, I really appreciate the history. Our whole system in New York flowed from, and Grace too, where you started us off, the exclusion that's contained in the 13th Amendment. And what we have now in New York in our Constitution, this part gets a little confusing, so bear with me. We really have an outgrowth of what it was known as convict leasing. We don't have, unlike a lot of other states in the West, we do not have a parallel 13th Amendment in our Constitution. So in some states like Colorado, where they've been successful in saying, hey, this is just like a housekeeping thing. We need to remove the exclusion for slavery, which in some ways is like an easier lift. Like, oh, we don't want to have slavery. So they remove it in the Constitution, but of course, in practice and in the laws probably of their Department of Corrections is the whole system. They haven't abolished courtcraft, which we all know is prison and slave labor, exploitive labor. So what we've done in our campaign, and I'd be happy to answer a lot of more questions about it, I just don't want to use up my full time here, is we have 2 bills. We have a bill that amends our Constitution to get rid of this convict leasing and systems like courtcraft, where, okay, the state decided, I don't know, maybe like 100 years ago, that you couldn't lease out convicts for incarcerated people to private institutions. So they created a system where the state profits off the back of incarcerated men and women. So we want to get rid of that. But more importantly, we've created a very extensive bill with our 2 champions, Senator Zelnor Myrie in the Senate and Senator Harvey Epstein in the Assembly, where we put together a bill that is informed, absolutely 100% informed by the formerly incarcerated and impacted folks we talked about. And we would eliminate courtcraft-like systems, require that minimum wage be paid for all prison labor, require safe working conditions and other labor protections, provide equitable access to work programs across the system and within the prison itself, eliminate fines and fees, which we all know could be used as a way to kind of claw back any increased payment, better access to earned wages. I guess there's what we heard from people, there's an incredibly slow approval process for actually getting your wages and sending it out to your family, and more autonomy around paying child support while incarcerated. So those are some of the goals of our legislation. We are, as you can imagine, eliminating courtcraft, and courtcraft-like systems is not going to be an easy lift. But structural change, when has structural change ever been easy? We are committed. We are excited to work with you and your campaigns as we advocate for a system that is truly fair and truly just. So thanks, and I'm happy to answer any questions, at the end of our presentation. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lisa. I think it's really dope that, we have this variety of people and like skill sets and knowledge base that all come together in support of something so critical. Again, for people that are currently suffering and oppressed, I think it's a very beautiful thing. And it just demonstrates to me that we need everybody in this fight. I promise you have something to bring to this, even if you don't feel like you're equipped or ready, or you haven't, jumped on a campaign before or participate in something like this. We need everybody's perspective. Everyone has something to bring. So thank you again, Lisa. We really appreciated the knowledge that you just dropped on us and your work in this, against this injustice. That took me a second. We appreciate you. So now we're gonna pass the mic to Cher Avery from New Pride Agenda.
Hi, everyone. Happy Martin Luther King Day. Shout out to Vidal, Next 100, and Fix the 13th, New York. I'm so happy to be here. I want to start off by acknowledging that my sweatshirt says your founding fathers owned slaves, just to set the tone as we recognize white supremacy and settler colonialism has continued to impact and target the most marginalized of our community, which are Black and Indigenous and immigrant communities. Apologies for background noise. I should have said I have a puppy who is lots of trouble. But with that, I am Cher Avery. I use they and them pronouns. I am the New York City community organizer for the New Pride Agenda. We are a legislative and advocacy organization on behalf of the LGBTQ community in New York State. I'm a Black and Indigenous non-binary trans femme who's personally been impacted by wrongful and discriminatory imprisonment in a men's prison in rural Make America Great Again, Pennsylvania. Policing in the United States has historically targeted the LGBTQ+ community, and trans women of color like myself have been especially vulnerable to experiencing disproportionate policing, and we are particularly susceptible to violence in jail. When we think about pipelines of poverty and homelessness that often lead to incarceration, it is unconscionable that the most progressive state in the nation is locking up marginalized communities primarily for crimes of survival. Living and working conditions in jails and prisons across the state are deplorable, they are unsafe, and they are detrimental to the quality of life of more than 90,000 New Yorkers. We know what's happening on Rikers Island. We know that the living conditions are not up to par. We know that people are living their lives, especially in the midst of the pandemic. And we know that even with the signing of the Less is More Act, Governor Hochul is using her authority to transfer more people into state prisons, not less. We must, as a community, as a state, as one New York, as a progressive New York, we must stand up against state violence that profitizes off of the forced prison labor of Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities, making this state more than $50 million a year. It is often the assumption that incarcerated folks or parolees do not make a valuable contribution to our society. But to echo the statements that have already been made, anything from drivers, anything from license plates to park benches to things on the subway platform to making hand sanitizer and soap and goods that we all as New Yorkers use, those are made by people who are in forced labor conditions, who are deserving of equal rights, equitable pay, and safe living and working conditions. We must end legal slavery. It is unconscionable that several hundred years later, we are still here. And that is because slavery in this country never ended. White supremacy in this country never came to an end when slavery was supposedly abolished, when Black people were supposedly emancipated. My people, my lineage, are still in chains. There are generations of people, of families who are still in chains, who are still shackled by the trauma and the devastation that incarceration brings. We must end legal slavery in New York State and across the country. We must also end solitary confinement once and for all. We must end the pipelines that lead to incarceration in the first place. We must free them all. Ends legal slavery, fix the 13th. Thanks so much, Vidal. Shout out to you. Glad to be on the same line this time around. And shout out to everyone who's contributing to this campaign. Let's get it done.
Hell yeah, to all of that. Thank you, Sheer. I think everybody was feeling exactly what you're saying, and we all appreciate the energy and the passion and the authenticity behind everything that you're saying. So I want to encourage people, if you're interested, if you have any questions that come up, to go ahead and plug them into the Q&A. Even if you're kind of curious as to how you can get involved, what kind of support that we need. If you're like, hey, like, you know, I do graphic design, I have this or that, you know, skill set, how can I contribute that? We definitely want to be in conversation with you, or any other questions that you have that would help you speak to this better, because the entire point of these gatherings is, you know, communal education and empowerment, to make it so that you can take this message everywhere. So our next speaker, another powerhouse, again, that we're very fortunate to have. We're just blessed to share space with this incredible, powerful group. And I hope that the people involved in this really encourage you in what's going on and give you hope for what can happen here. We're going to pass it on to Donna Hilton, who is, again, a phenomenon, powerhouse, and she is from A Little Piece of Light. So take it away, Donna.
Thank you, Grace. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to those in other parts of the country and the world. I'm just honored and thankful. You know, today, it's interesting. I'm celebrating 10 years of freedom today, right? I came out 10 years ago from New York State's maximum security prison for women. And it's interesting how, you know, things evolve or don't evolve, right? I remember being in prison and waking up one morning and told that this DMV was coming to, you know, the prison. And just those of you that don't know, the Department of Motor Vehicles, DMV, uses prison labor to do a lot of its work. So oftentimes when you're calling DMV in New York and in this country, really, you're speaking to someone that's incarcerated. And people don't know that. People don't know the many types of prison labor that is used and what we are basically forced into doing, to working, right? For hardly any wage. So I was going over some of the things that I had learned, and I wanted to share that with you. I didn't want to come with like a prepared speech, because I wanted to come from my lived experience and how it felt for me and those like me who continue to be oppressed under these conditions. And I just want to be very clear and to state that, you know, in 1865, when the 13th Amendment was ratified, that's when they started, right? The first wave of mass incarceration, right? Mass incarcerating Black people, let's be clear, Black people, very clear about that. And it was the years after slavery that the formal prison system was created, right? In the South specifically, that's where it was created. And what they did, what the states did, was buy plantations. They bought these plantations right after the war, and they bought them, and they figured out a way to continue slavery and to make it and to justify it. And so they turned these plantations into prison. Angola, I don't know if any of you know about Angola in New Orleans, but it's one of the largest, if not the largest, prison, which was a plantation in this country. And so it continues to do the work of slavery, right? I remember waking up when they said DMV was coming, and I was one of the chosen ones, where I would be earning anywhere from, now let's be clear here, earning anywhere from 35 cents to $1.65, depending on how I moved up the ladder within the DMV program. And to me, that was like, wow, making so much money. That's unconscionable. That's outright wrong. To force us into labor that benefits a socialist, capitalist, was a capitalist environment, society, on the backs of those that have no other recourse. We have no other ways of making money, because they make sure that it's not possible. When we see the fires in California, I'm not sure if most of you know that the people putting out those fires, the first people in the front lines, are people that are incarcerated. And they say that it's voluntary, that they do it voluntarily. No, what voluntarism looks like for people in prison is that they tell you, well, if you don't go do this, then you're not going to get your good time. You're not going to go home. If you don't go do this job that we're demanding that you do, then you're going to go into solitary confinement. If you don't go do this job that we're demanding you to do, then you won't have any visits. You won't have any mail. You won't get packages. You won't. Not only is that slavery, it's cruel and inhumane. It's cruel and inhumane. So when I was told, when Vidal reached out to me about this campaign, and we started talking, I immediately, without question, said this was something important and necessary for me to be a part of. Why? Because we continue to fight these systems daily. So I see some of you saying that you didn't even know that. Yes, and during the hurricanes, exactly, in New Orleans, when the hurricanes happened, they didn't tell you about the hundreds of bodies that were washing down the streets and into the levees, that were people that were incarcerated, and that the people that were incarcerated were the ones that they were making to clean up and to retrieve dead bodies and animals and clean up. They don't tell you that. For 10 cents, 5 cents, 30 cents. They don't tell you that. But they make it seem like it's one of the best things that could ever happen to us. Prison is nothing but an extension of slavery. And so we don't need to just fix the 13th, we need to get rid of the 13th. There is no way on this earth that we should continue to have slavery of such proportions. We continue to incarcerate people, Black and brown people, and justify it. Get slave labor, all kinds of labor from those of us, and justify it and say, well, You did something wrong. So, you know, you have to be accountable. The punishment is in the time spent away from society. Punishment should not be the situations that are forced upon us or them. It should not be. So I'm thankful that this campaign has started, but I'm really, really hoping that you all join this campaign, you help us out, you demand that the 13th not just be fixed, but abolished, because we can't continue to do this. We can't continue to force people into situations and justify it by saying, oh, well, the system says that this person needs this and these. No, that's not true. The vast amount of people that are suffering under these conditions, slave-like conditions, are Black and brown people. Let's be very clear who's being harmed. And I'm tired of it always going back to race, but we have to be very clear that it's always about race. Always about race. So I want everyone to look and dig deep inside of themselves and say, is this the right thing? Do you care enough? Is it wrong? Should we get this abolished? Or is it okay to treat people worse than you would treat your family pet? So the time is now. Let's fix the 13th. Let's abolish the 13th. Enough with human slavery. Thank you all.
Yeah. We felt that, right? We're so lucky to have had Donna here. Go buy her memoir, A Little Piece of Light, because those are the stories that we need to be equipped with, and that they're so powerful, those testimonies that the public doesn't get to hear. It's like we have over 2 million people incarcerated in this country, and you know, there's in New York, you know, the prisons are upstate, people are really isolated and excommunicated from their communities and spiritually weakened to the point that the point is depleting someone of their ability to like advocate for themselves. And not only that, but to feel empowered to fight back. So when you hear advocates like the ones that we've heard today who have survived this strategic systemic disempowerment and they're here to share their testimony and tell you the truth, you need to have all ears, even when it's hard to listen to those details, because that's a hidden truth that they've tried to suppress and help you turn away from and be distracted from. So thank you again, Donna. Like, if y'all need to be activated, right? These are not just words that you hear and don't do anything with. That was powerful, as was what everybody else shared. I wish that we were in a better world in which people didn't have those experiences to share, but we're blessed that we have advocates that have the strength to look into the fire and fight back against the oppression that they faced, and have that energy to want to make sure that others aren't left behind. So again, yeah, no, that really touched me. I know that just looking at the chat, it gave everybody, it filled everyone with a lot of emotion and intention and inspiration. And I hope that these words galvanize you and they don't just go from one ear to the other. These words and experiences matter. So our last speaker is me. I'm just amazed again as to all the different pieces of movement that we got to hear today. I'm incredibly moved. I'm going to keep my piece short and simple because the point that I'm making is really that it is very simple and clear as day. I come into these spaces have being in community with folks that have survived incarceration, survived everything that comes with that exploitation. And again, the excommunication and forced labor, right? And we also bond in a shared trauma. I'm a violence survivor, and I am very connected to the cause of abolition and of healing people rather than being retributive, because I know that wounds need to heal and people need to be given the foundational support that they need to get the life that they deserve, right? And that I don't feel any safer as a victim of severe violence, knowing that incarceration is what our society has deemed to be the answer. I know that trauma begets trauma, and to know that people are exploited in prison, that breaks away at someone's self-esteem and sense of self-image in a way that makes it very hard for them to be able to have the confidence and the tools and the interconnectedness needed to be a part and to reintegrate into their society, their communities. So this is very much an emotional exploitation as much as it is a physical one. There are over 4,000 corporations that benefit from forced prison labor, over 4,000, by integrating that forced labor into their supply chain, right? So if corporations benefit from mass incarceration, then they're also directly benefiting from the violence and degradation of Black and Brown communities that results in incarceration, as well as the trauma and mass separation of families that incarceration creates. It has become profitable for underserved Black and Brown communities to be torn apart by mass incarceration. That's sick. It's just to wrap your head around the fact that we pretend that incarceration is something that keeps us safe, but it's a poison that, again, it doesn't just touch the individual. No one is singular. We're interconnected. And when we are hurt, when we are disrespected, when we are broken down psychologically, that impacts everyone that we sit in community with. There's a saying, and I wish I knew who I could attribute it to, that when you're incarcerated, your family is incarcerated with you. Another element of who I am, what I do, is in reentry services. I work and I'm building this amazing reentry organization called Dream Deferred with a mentor of mine named Franz Michel, who is incredible, formerly incarcerated. It was co-founded by Vinay Sykes, who was, anybody that knows that name just understands the energy that she brought. And she was someone incredible in my life. And through Dream Deferred, we're keeping that legacy alive. And reentry is very special to me because the concept of not just second chances, but personal redemption, I think is something that is foundational and that everyone deserves. And through that, you learn about, again, the not just the individual, but the community that they're connected to, right? So you learn about the fact that prisons and the exploitation that occurs in prisons through forced labor impacts families very heavily. So with people earning these cents of it's despicable to even call it a wage because people are just earning cents on the dollar, right? That affects their ability to provide for their families on the outside, which again shatters their ability to stay connected to their families, to their communities. So I wanted to talk about those pieces because there's so much structurally damage in the way that mass incarceration works and the exploitation that happens. It doesn't just affect one person. It breaks apart our communities, and they found a way to make it profitable. And we need everybody's energy to fight back against that. So thank you for hearing me out. I want to thank everybody that we heard from today, the advocates, the people that survived incarceration and exploitations and abuses firsthand. I want to thank all of our speakers again. I also want to thank the Next 100 team who has helped put this together. And we're really serious about ending legal slavery. We're going to continue the fight for freedom that our ancestors started. Again, we say to Governor Hochul, to the state Senate and Assembly members, if you want to stand on the side of justice and freedom, if you really want to stand with Black, Latinx, and all oppressed people, there's very clear things that you can do. We have people that have experienced this that can tell you better than anyone what the solution is. We need to end legal slavery. We need to raise the minimum prison wage. We need to end forced labor and end forced vocational training. So everybody's mission here is to help us get the word out. If you ever or if you have a community group or space in which we can have folks come and talk about this, be a part of our community, even if you can make a small contribution of opening those doors and again, creating space for this conversation. Let's stay connected through that. Follow us on social media, share our posts, get the word out that like this is happening. We count on you for that because there's a lot of power here, but we cannot do it alone. And the more we mobilize together, the quicker this will happen and the quicker the suffering will end. So we want to take a little bit of time to answer some questions that have come up. And this is open to the panelists. If anybody feels compelled or wants to answer a particular question, just go ahead and jump in. So Stephen Licardi asked, how might the arts, visual art, music, poetry, etc., contribute to the campaign? What is needed from our artists? It's a really good question.
Yeah, I can say a little bit about that. So Nina Simone, a lot of people may have heard of her. Nina Simone, she was a famous musician, trained in classical music. She said that an artist's duty is to reflect the times. And you know, in 1971, some people might not know this, John Lennon and Yoko Ono, they wrote a song in response to the Attica Rebellion, you know, and the massacre called Attica State. And they actually performed the song at the Apollo Theater. You could probably Google it on YouTube and see the performance and hear the words. It's powerful. Muhammad Ali, who many of us know, you know, the greatest of all time boxer, he was also a poet, and he wrote a poem about this Attica Rebellion, which you could also find online. Like, I like hip hop, and there are artists out there like No Name, like My Son, who are also activists, and they make music, you know, that reflects the time, you know, conscious raises music. So if you're artist, you know, that makes music, you know, make music that raises the consciousness of people, that speaks to the time that we in now. And that's a little piece of advice that I give to, you know, folks.
That's, again, count on Darren to give you that history, that backbone of the movement, and a reminder that the ancestors have carried us here. So the next question comes from Kate Lisa with Johnson Newspaper Corp and the Watertown Daily Times. What bills are you specifically pushing for? Are they new this session?
Hey, how you doing? I think with us, we are basically with, you know, gonna be talking just a little bit background with the 13th Forward and the Fix It 13th. You know, the Fix It 13th is mostly directly impacted people, organizations that are led by directly impacted people, and the 13th Forward are lawyers who are mostly lawyers, and we're going to be working together. So some of the things that Lisa can kind of talk about, but for us, we're supporting some of the bills that exist right now and some of the bills that the 13th Forward is also supporting. You know, and Lisa can talk some more about that, but it is supporting Myri's, you know, raising wage and also ending the legal slavery bill. You know what I'm saying? So we're supporting both of them, but the 13th Forward can also talk about, because we'll see us, we're going to be working together as like lawyers and directly impacted people. But Lisa can talk a little bit more on that. I'll leave it for her for that.
Thank you, Vidal. Yeah, so maybe some of you know, the campaign used to be called Labor is Labor. That was a campaign of worth rises. And we have just kind of taken the baton and it's really right now, it's like NYCLU, the Legal Aid Racial Justice Project, and Color of Change, and Citizen Action. So we've been working together for a couple of years, and we're really committed to kind of pushing this over the finish line. And we're so happy to be working with Fix the 13th, because as Vidal said, I mean, we're not all lawyers, but we're a little lawyer heavy. And that's why we held the Impacted Peoples Forum, because, you know, our theory of change is the same as your theory of change, which is like center the voices of impacted people. Don't even take a step without making sure that you are reflecting their needs and desires and values. So yeah, there's two bills that we have right now. I don't know if you want the numbers, but I can give them to you. The Constitutional Amendment Bill, and they're both sponsored by Myrie and Epstein. These were bills that were part of Labor is Labor, but we have really amended them based on what we're hearing from the community. The Constitutional Amendment Bill is Senate Bill 308, and the DOCS bill, the Department of Corrections bill, which is much broader, is Senate Bill 416. I know that they don't reflect the current amendments that we have made, because we're waiting on Senator Myrie's staff and Senator Epstein's staff to amend the language. So right now they're kind of cramped, but those will be the bills. It'll be an amended version of 416, and the Constitutional Amendment Bill is the same. I hope that answers your question. I'm also available offline, or, you know, whatever, to email me, lzucker@nyclu.org, if you have other questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Vidal and Lisa. Kate Lisa also asked, have you discussed with legislative leaders and Governor Hochul's representatives? What is the support in the Senate Assembly and the executive? Is this realistic to get done in New York, and why or why not?
Let me just take a stab at that also, because, you know, the legislative strategy is often different than the actual campaign. So we've spoken obviously extensively with Senator Myrie and Senator Epstein. We have not spoken with Hochul's staff yet. If people were watching or aware of the state of the state, it was really interesting. She put in there like a very significant piece about this Jails to Jobs program. I don't know where that came from. Maybe it's our opening. It clearly isn't something that it would be sufficient to address all our needs, but maybe that is an opening. What we want to do right now is we really want to educate elected officials. Not yet the governor's office, although I guess we can reach out to them too. But I think Vidal, hopefully at our next meeting, we will work out a strategy for that. Because this is the last thing I'll say. The constitutional amendment, in order to amend the Constitution, which we have to do in order to make other amendments. You can't have two things that are inconsistent, because if the Constitution isn't amended and the legislation is in conflict, the legislation falls. So the way to amend the Constitution, it has to be done in 2 successive legislative sessions. We're in year 2 of the 2021-22 session. We want to get that constitutional amendment bill passed this session. That is a priority. And at the same time, working on the DOCS bill to embody what all the impacted people want to see. And I think we'll be holding some legislative briefings, hopefully with help from you all, and talking to the elected officials one by one, talking to them about going to their caucus. There's a big, meeting of the Black and Brown legislators that usually happens this time in February, but has been moved to April. That's a great opportunity for us to uplift this campaign.
Thank you again for that. Let's see what's next. Lisa, you've just been a gem with this knowledge and getting people to really understand like the legislative side of things, which can feel very inaccessible, right? So we appreciate your ability to vocalize that for us and make it make sense. So Joseph Lipinski asks, is the movement asking, Is the movement asking for forced prison laborers to receive back pay to minimum wage standards? Is it all part of the issue of slave reparations?
Yeah, I can help out on that. I think with us right now, this is, right now people need to get paid. Like, people incarcerated, Myri's bill is to $3 an hour. For us, we feel like, the Fix the 13 campaign feel that we should go higher. I think we're having that conversation, and we'll have that more conversation with the 13 Forward. I think this is a very exciting moment for New York State to step in this radical conversation, but also inspire other states of what it looks like to advocate for people to get for people incarcerated get higher wages. Right now, we are like looking at that $3, but it doesn't stop there. Like, this is a conversation we'll keep having with the 13 Forward, and as our campaign pushes forward as a collectively, what I'm saying, we are just looking at it as being important for us to go higher. So, like, I think right now we see Myri's prison wage bill as a start, but it's not the end. And I think all of us are looking at how do we all collectively push forward together. And this is the introduction of the campaign, but this is not the end. And for us collectively as the 13, the Fix the 13 and 13 Forward move to collectively, we'll make sure that we fight for real justice, and that means like giving people a higher wages that include that. We noticed that even in Nevada itself, they are advocating and making sure that people are actually getting higher wages. And even in Baltimore itself, advocates over there has been fighting to even get people incarcerated over there higher wages. But as collectively, Lisa can talk about more on that part. And I think with us, we're just agreeing that that's not, the $3 is not enough, and we're making sure that people incarcerated are actually paid what they deserve. But Lisa, you want to say something?
No, I think that says it, Vidal. As we talked about when we met, as the legislative process, if you start at $3, you're going to end up at like $1. They never give you what you want. So let's start at a true and just wage, which is minimum wage. I even heard somebody say, okay, maybe you don't want to give it to all of us up front. Like, give us half the minimum wage. Give us, $7.50, and put the other $7.50 in an account for us that we can access when we get out of here, so we don't have to actually go into a homeless shelter when we leave. That's an interesting idea too. But let's start at what's fair and just. Let's start at 15.
Thank you again. I think we have one more question. I'm just going to put in, the last one is just asking about Dream Deferred. I'm just going to put that in the chat. Thank you for your interest in that. Thank you, everyone. This was a really powerful gathering. And again, I hope that it galvanized you, gave you a lot to think about, and gave you a sense of obligation and responsibility for this. Again, I'm going to give you a little homework. I want you to follow us on social media. I want you to take the information you learn here and bring it to every space that you're in. I want you to create opportunities for formerly incarcerated people to become the advocates that they deserve to be on these topics, and to get platforms to talk and also be paid appropriately, because their knowledge is hard earned. And we need to fight for equity for everyone. Again, we really appreciate all of you being here. Feel free to drop in your emails as well if you have other questions or if you want to stay connected. Thank you for hanging with us. I had a really powerful time. I love